From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And I again. Well, welcome to the show. I'm Ken Davis, and it's Chicago Newsroom once again. You know, we're only 3 weeks away from the elections for governor, senator, and a bunch of other races, but really, I think you'd have to say the stunning news about Karen Lewis's reported brain tumor really refocused Chicago politics this week. There now appears to be no truly strong opponent to Mayor Emanuel, and his re-election seems pretty much assured, but we'll talk about that more on the show today. Oh, and his budget address this week would also seem to strengthen his case for re-election because there really wasn't that much criticism of his plan, at least on the surface. Seems to be holding the line on taxes and offering some new services, and it seems at first glance that it's got fewer of those kind of Rich Daley-esque budget stunts like selling off the parking meters. But the big issue, that looming $550 million pension payment that comes due this year, well, Emanuel has put that off again in this budget. But he says it's with good reason because, you know, the Illinois Supreme Court's got to do their thing. And when they decide, well, then he'll maybe try to find some money, but not right now. So, joining us today, the Tribune's John Byrne, City Hall reporter. Glad to have you back on the show again, John. I know you were massively tweeting out the very eventful budget thing the other day. And making what I guess is his last ever appearance on Chicago Newsroom, WBEZ political reporter Al Keefe joining us. Alex Keefe.
Whatever.
Sorry to see you leaving Chicago because, you know, there are hundreds of thousands of people in Vermont who listen to public radio every morning. And they really haven't figured out yet that this guy is going to be their new best buddy on Vermont Public Radio, because that's what you're going to be doing, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be actually in the afternoon. I'll be hosting All Things Considered for Vermont Public Radio, which is a statewide network. It was morning edition. So it will be your drive time home. I think traffic is a little bit less of an issue in Vermont, which is a big selling point. I wouldn't lie. Sitting on Lakeshore Drive, I'm like, man, Vermont's feeling pretty great right now.
You said there's how many people live in Vermont?
I think it's like 620,000-ish people, 626, 7, 8,000 people.
So
I'm moving,
basically Naperville,
I'm moving
Aurora.
to Burlington, Vermont, which is the largest city in Vermont, which is 40,000 or so people. So there are more people in my ward. Pat O'Connor, where I live, has more people under him than the mayor of Burlington.
Wow.
But to me, this is kind of a reason to move there. I think suddenly traffic jams seem all the more horrible. Everything just seems worse about Chicago
Will you
now.
be nostalgic for the Dan Ryan and the Edens?
Oh yeah, no, I'll definitely miss the Jane Byrne interchange.
The Jane Byrne, you have
The
to come
Jane
back
Byrne.
for
the
the
circle.
Jane Byrne, right?
Yeah, that's what we all miss about Chicago.
So I decided to do a quick little thing here. You're going to need to know these things. Who is the governor of Vermont?
Oh, no.
Do you know?
It's Peter Shumlin.
Oh, good. And
Governor
who's the
Peter
Republican
Shumlin.
challenger?
His name is Scott Milne.
Oh, my God. The guy's all ready. He's
name is
ready to
Scott
go.
Milne.
He's ready to go. There was a great quote out there on the internets. The 5 other candidates on the ballot include an aging socialist, an earth activist and hemp promoter, a woman with a big hat, a libertarian, and an independent who appears to be a character from Duck Dynasty.
I did not write that.
So just like Chicago, really? I mean, come on.
I have to say,
Step
I was
right in.
I was a little worried that Vermont politics would not be as interesting. And then there's this semi-viral video that's going around from this PBS debate from the gubernatorial debate in the state of Vermont, from Vermont Public Television. And I was so excited by this because I was like, you know what? This is democracy. This is going to be good. There was so much good radio in there. So just when you think, it's just a different kind of fascinating.
Vermont might be the last place in America where democracy survives. It'll be
It's
that
a stronghold.
last little ember. Yeah.
They've been doing the town meetings. It's wonderful for democracy, and you should go check out the video of the gubernatorial debate if you do not believe me.
Yeah. Well, we do have to spend a little time talking about Chicago politics today, and all the rest of that. You know, it's just incredibly sad and just amazingly, I don't know, profound the way the Karen Lewis thing happened with her, and obviously we wish her the best and her family. But it really makes a big mess of politics in Chicago with her pulling out of the race, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, people who, I don't know who else might have gotten in, but certainly people were hinging a lot of their hopes for this groundswell of anti-Emanuel support, the supposed groundswell of anti-Emanuel support. They were hinging it on Karen Lewis as their standard bearer. I mean, we've got Bob Fioretti out there certainly, but but I think she was the person who people thought could give the mayor a really possibly a tough run for his money.
I mean, she was the highest profile progressive candidate, and not just on a Chicago level or a union level, but on a national level, thanks to the teachers' strike, and for a little while on an international level, because that was such a big story. And she's good tape, you know. I mean, every time she steps up, she's good tape. And we laugh about that, but when it comes to earned media and things like this, and the Sun-Times and the Tribune, that's really important. Who is going to step up and do that? That's a vacuum.
You know, you got to believe that even Rahm Emanuel is probably disappointed by this, because he likes a fight, and I'm sure I'm sure completely confident that he could beat her, but that it was going to be a real Donnybrook, and he was probably kind of looking forward to it at some level. I'm getting these cold stares. I guess that's my own theory.
I mean, he's got $9 million he's got to spend somewhere. What's he going to do? Can you spend $9 million in campaign money just on beating up Bob Fioretti and Amara Enya?
How many bad things can you say about Bob Fioretti with $9 million?
Right.
And you know, again, we talk about this often here, but the poor people in the front offices at Channel 7 and Channel 5 and Channel 2 and all the other broadcast outlets must be just like holding their breath right now, thinking, my God, that's millions and millions of dollars we're not going to get. They had their inventories just booked for the next 7 weeks or something.
And the reporters as well. I saw that Robert Feeder, the media columnist, did a post either this morning or last night where he actually interviewed some political reporters in Chicago saying, like, really, what does this mean? And the consensus is what I've heard in press scrums for weeks off the record, which was, if she doesn't run, this is going to be boring. Really boring. And that's what everybody was finally saying, is get ready for a really boring
I've heard
campaign.
in the City Hall press corps the conventional wisdom is, if she doesn't run, the best thing to do is like move to Vermont or something.
Yeah, that's what we have been saying. That's what they say in public radio.
Move to Vermont. It just sounds so trite to even have this conversation at this point, but I mean, Rahm Emanuel's reelected, right? I mean, why bother have the election? Is there any reason to even have an election at this point?
Well, I think we have to.
Oh, by law.
It's like a thing, in America. I think we do have to have an election.
Oh, that's right.
But that was a question, particularly with the progressive community, is who picks up the standard? Who picks up the mantle? Bob Fioretti, maybe, but he'll have to do a lot of legwork, because she, I was talking with Don Rose and with some other progressive Politico watchers this week, and they say she had the package. She could get African Americans, she could get women, certainly she could get the union vote from a lot of places where the mayor was having trouble, and she's a good talker. She's a personality. She's not afraid to fight. And even if she couldn't win, and I don't know that I've heard that many people who are looking at the numbers say she definitely could win. She could give him a run for his money, but more importantly, I think she's someone that Rahm has to pay attention. He can't ignore her.
That's exactly right.
He can no longer ignore her. Even if he looks at his numbers and says, well, she can't win this race, he can't ignore her. She can't be sidelined like a down ballot, long shot candidate. So it is a loss, I think, not just for progressives who might be looking for someone to represent them, but for a debate, citywide debate about issues.
And I think the other thing that all those things you say, and I would add to that, she also was able to keep schools on the front burner in a way that other candidates wouldn't be able to. And I think it's just kind of interesting, this whole thing that happened in the last couple of weeks about how they pulled back on the charter schools, just ironically a couple of days before the big study comes out that says that the charter schools are largely failing in 3 or 4 different metrics. So, that's the kind of stuff that Karen Lewis could hammer that Bob Fioretti's not going to be able to hammer in any kind of credible way. So that is a major issue. And one of the things we were talking about on the show last week is, will the mayor now be able to run on his education record, because he's not going to have this constant hammering from the other side saying, no, your accomplishments have been less than stellar. So we might actually be able to see him, be able to make a case that he's actually improved education.
His budget address yesterday was a campaign. It was an education agenda speech. It was running on his bona fides during his first term on full day kindergarten. We heard that, which we've been hearing from him for years. We heard the city colleges give scholarships to kids bit. He didn't mention closing schools, but the first 20 minutes of the speech were almost all education
After
accomplishments,
school,
after school programs
yeah.
for teens. You know, so he apparently is gearing up to make that case.
He has often referred to himself as an education mayor, and I guess maybe he's gonna do some more of that. So let's talk about the budget itself. It was there's always some pomp and circumstance on budget day when the mayor stands before the city council. It's kind of like almost like our version of the State of the Union address or something, I guess, in a way, because it's sort of like, the budget is the big policy speech, right? It's telling you where we're going to put our resources, where we think our problems are. I was surprised, I'd have to say, that unlike last year, where my recollection is that there was a lot of opposition to a lot of the things he was doing in the budget, this year that was pretty silent. Even Lawrence Massal just said, well, it's other than this big thing,
Right.
it's basically a pretty solid budget.
Well, he's doing potholes.
Yeah, he's doing the Holy Trinity. You're giving more money to tree trimming, killing rats, and blasting graffiti, which this is an election year, or election season, I guess.
I talked to an alderman who's generally aligned with guys who fight with the mayor a little bit more, and said, what do you think about this? He didn't address pensions. He basically gave us a valedictory on his first term. And this guy said, he's putting a lot of money into potholes. I said, is that what you want to see coming into election? And he just smiled, walked away, and that was it. Well,
And you say, the budget speech is a time for us to hear about priorities, and it wasn't really yesterday, though. I mean, it was certainly an election season speech, but it was more so than previous budget speeches from this mayor about highlighting his accomplishments, but also speaking to critics. I mean, we heard him say at several points in the speech something like, Chicago doesn't work unless it works for everybody, unless it works for every neighborhood. It's not just jobs in the Loop, it's jobs in Roseland, it's jobs all over the city. And I think you see him answering this criticism of being a mayor 1%, of being a mayor for corporations and things like that. So in more ways than one, it was an election season speech. But really, as far as what's in the budget, we didn't hear all that much aside from the road into the scholarships, a lot of education stuff, but we didn't get to the nitty-gritty.
I talked to a reporter at City Hall yesterday who's seen, this is probably his 25th of these, and he said he's never seen a budget address so bereft of numbers on the revenues for the coming year. It didn't have any of that. None of that. Well, we expect sales tax to be better. It was a first-term speech.
It was
really
about
striking.
It was about accomplishments. It was almost in a way it was almost defensive. It kind of reminded me when President Barack Obama was here a couple weeks ago to talk about the economy and just talked about what he's done about the economy. It was almost defensive. It was almost preemptively defensive in a way to list all of his accomplishments. And there was some look ahead, as you mentioned. There was money to services, a lot of stuff about schools, but a lot of it was just talking about what he did and everybody in, nobody left out, to paraphrase our
Last year
governor.
there was a lot of criticism about the mayor not involving the public in any way in the development of his budget. And this year I didn't hear much of that. Maybe it's just because you guys didn't bother to report it. I don't know what it is. I have no idea. But, it's like for those of us who were around for a while, one of the great circus events in Chicago was Mayor Daley's community budget hearings. They were just a great laugh.
Radio gold.
Radio gold. Just filled with clips of audio. And of course, this mayor, the digital mayor, says, no, we don't need to do that anymore. We're just we'll take comments, online. We don't need to go out into the community and have these goofy meetings. And there was a lot of resistance about that last year, but that resistance seems to have just completely subsided now.
Well, it's interesting. He would like to be characterized as the digital mayor, and he makes this case about we can take these things online. But really, when you look at him versus Daley, Daley was, say what you want about the guy, he would go out and do that retail politics thing forever. He would sit at those meetings for hours and hours and hours and hours. And it was writ large the way he interacted with the public on ribbon cuttings, on all this other stuff. He would spend all kinds of time. And this mayor, I think, you referred to it as a circus. I think Emanuel probably sees it as a circus. He's got more important things to do. He's not going to pretend. He's not going to pretend that just because he's sitting at a table with people stepping up one at a time to complain about potholes on 87th and Stony, that's going to influence the way we do the budget. And Mayor Daley saw an importance in making that connection with people in an old school way.
And that's exactly what it is, old school. I worked for a spell for the city in the mayor's office, and so I was one of the people who had to go out to those things, and it was hilarious. I mean, you'd have the mayor at the podium, and then this phalanx of 30 city,
department heads, one department head after another, and he'd look down and say, "You're going to take care of that, right?" And the water department got to go.
And you sit there and write it down.
Absolutely,
and
Mr. Mayor.
I've always wondered whatever happened to all of those notes that get written down there. Just like on the way out the door, they're probably all in a trash can somewhere. But anyway, there was at least the semblance of some kind of public participation in the creation of the budget. Now we don't have that anymore. It's just done and it's just presented.
And I think you still hear complaints about that. I mean, I don't think people love to hear stories about transparency and good government. Sometimes I go back and forth thinking about whether this is something reporters get more uptight about than the general public. But these are concerns that I heard yesterday from some progressive aldermen. I mean,
he already complained about it.
We hear this every time during the budget process. They say, listen, we just got these documents for the first time yesterday and we weren't allowed to take them out of the room, and this is top-down governing and they don't include us in this process. This budget won't change. So that does still come up. I imagine there will still be some criticism about the public hearing process. Keep in mind, we're at the beginning of this process. So the hearings start next week at City Council. If there are some public e-hearings or Snapchat hearings or something, I don't know what they're going to do.
That disappear after 10 seconds.
After 10 seconds. If that happens at all, it'll be coming up soon. But I've had people from the mayor's office tell me directly, these public hearings they were kind of useless. I mean, what is it good to have the guy in the tinfoil hat scream at the mayor about something?
Right. And he's not going to pretend the way that Daley felt it was important to him. You can argue the merits of that politically and in terms of community involvement, but it's just a different way to look at it. And every year, Emanuel has given something back. It's been a little bit from when he introduces the budget to when it passes. He gives something back, and I really believe that to a certain extent he delivers the budget thinking, I'm going to give this back, so that when we pass it, I can answer those critics and say, you know what,
This was community input.
Alderman Riley came to me and said this garage tax was a bad idea, so we lowered it. But I think I don't have any evidence of this, and direct evidence from the mayor's office. But I think he introduces a $10 million garage tax increase as he does this year, thinking to himself, we're going to lower that to $3 million so I can say that Riley complained about hitting people who want to park downtown, and I listened.
And this is something we don't just see with the budget. We see this in many negotiations. I think John's right. I don't have any evidence for this, but a lot of times you see him over ask and then step back so that later it seems like he can say, hey, I
am a community involvement guy. I listened.
Which is maybe smart. Maybe that's a good negotiating tactic.
So there are a couple of things that just kind of stick out a little bit in the budget. The projection that the cameras are going to be bringing in like 40, 60, about $100 million or something between the red light and the speed cameras, right?
Right.
Does that take into account the slightly adjusted yellow lights? And if the budget falls short, are they going to adjust it by another tenth of a second? Because what is a tenth of a second? It's about $20 million or something, right? Every time they do it.
It was they raised $8 million in about 6 months on tickets given to people who went through a yellow light shorter than 3 seconds.
It's 2.9 seconds.
It was 2.9, but then they went back. I mean, it's back to 3. Judges started throwing them out. My colleague David Kidwell, who's obviously owned this story, asked some questions. Some judges said, I'm not going to honor this ticket. And they went back to the 3. So, the mayor was sort of non-committal, but didn't rule out.
But that only happened because your newspaper printed that story.
And judges started to throw out the tickets.
But that only happened because they were made aware of it because of the newspaper.
Clearly.
So, so the real question would be, what is the 2.9 seconds hidden in this
equivalent
budget,
in the 2015 budget?
We won't know until
I don't know
until they start happening.
We'll see.
But I mean, that's, if memory serves me, isn't that less than the mayor used to say he was going to get out of these cameras?
Yeah, it is, and I'm trying to remember what the exact initial projection was, but the 40 million on the speed and the 60 million on the red lights, the speed cameras in particular. I think this is down by some significant amount, not half, but maybe 25%, 30%.
And it's an interesting kind of a parallel, because they put up the speed cameras. They expected them to make a lot of money. People started slowing down when they saw the speed cameras, so the revenue went down. And the mayor got to say, well, that's why we put them up in the first place. Because we wanted people to slow down. Of course,
But they also, and we've reported on this in the past too. They also started changing the rules to the speed cameras when they started going up and started getting press. There were a couple of early stories based on projections that said, "Whoa, this is going to be a haul, way bigger than City Hall is projecting."
Right.
Then they started kind of changing the rules and staggering the start dates and doing this and that, so that you weren't going to get a ticket right away. And then of course at the beginning, the revenues were way lower than they projected. So I think they pulled it back a little bit. It'll be interesting to see a full year to see what that actually brings in once they're all up and running.
Were you at the editorial board yesterday when the mayor showed up?
Yeah.
So did he do a good job? Did he impress the editorial board?
I don't talk to the editorial board. I go in. It's an opportunity for me to ask him some questions based on his budget speech, and we don't get to ask him questions in general all that often. So I ask him my questions, and then I don't discuss things with the editorial board afterward. They asked him a lot of stuff about pensions and why he didn't didn't address pensions.
We should address that here, because we've kind of bypassed that. In brief, the city of Chicago is going to have to come up with about $550 million in money to just replenish the pensions, right? You're Mr. Pension. I don't know what we're going to do without you around to explain pensions to
John's
us anymore.
here.
But
I love John.
But we can't.
Don't go to Vermont.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't harass him all the time.
So here's the short of it. Okay, so
Yeah.
we got basically two options. So Chicago, for decades and decades, lowballed the amount that they should have paid into pensions. They were following state laws, but everybody knew the state laws were goofy. So they've been underfunded for decades. In 2010, the legislature passed this law saying, okay, because you've been lowballing this and underfunding them, starting in 2015 or 2016, if you ask City Hall, that's a squishy deadline, you're going to have to basically make up for all the stuff you should have been paying. You're going to have to do it more or less right away. Well, this is a problem because suddenly you're hitting a $550 million wall to pay for police and fire pensions. City Hall says that comes due in 2016. So the mayor has two choices. One, fine $550 million, which is a lot of couch cushions at City Hall.
Yeah.
Two, go to Springfield and change the rules of the game, as they've done with the laborers and municipal pension funds, which are also deep underwater, in order to lower that initial payment and get them on a payment schedule. But the problem is,
wait until after the election and say, property taxes, guys, I did my best.
Yeah. So and that's what we're faced with. Yesterday, we didn't hear anything about one or two or three, for that matter. He didn't say this is how we're saving money to prepare for this big payment that's going to come due. But he also didn't say exactly this is what I want from Springfield. I think he did say something that if everybody gives a little,
then
nobody
will
has
have
to give
everything.
everything, which is a line, we've heard similar lines to that before. But the bottom line is there's this booming silence about what's going to happen until maybe after the election.
And he justified the silence by saying the recent Supreme Court ruling on pensions healthcare, saying you cannot diminish it. He called it a wet blanket on the negotiations with police and fire. He said that we're all waiting for some clarity. The police union and the fire union aren't going to negotiate with us until we get more of an understanding about what this means.
So, I mean, in essence, what happened is that some people sued when they got their health care benefits cut, and it got all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, in a related ruling, not on this specifically, did indicate that they thought that health benefits were part of a pension and therefore subject to the state law, that they can't be diminished or impaired or whatever. So now everybody is kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop because they have to rule on this thing for Chicago, right? At some point. We don't know when, in a couple of months. So the mayor is then just saying, well, then there's no reason for me to do anything now. And actually he does make a good point. If he started storing up hundreds of millions of dollars and raising all this money, then the unions would say, well, that's right, that's exactly right, that's ours, we're coming to take it, right?
And I think he's figuring too that once the state legislators get through their election, that there'll be a willingness in Springfield to at least address this in some fashion.
Governor
some
politics
sort of
might play into it too.
So absolutely, and he and his budget people who came to the editorial board yesterday were talking quite a bit about a statewide solution. So maybe they're looking at a state sales tax increase or something like that.
And this seems to also be a tactic in order to get downstate lawmakers to vote on probably cutting Chicago police and fire pensions. There's a police and fire pension problem all over the state of Illinois. It's not just the city of Chicago. So if you can get everybody as part of one thing, this could be one sort of legislative tactic. But I mean, I think the mayor actually makes a good point. Depending on how the Supreme Court rules on the state pension bill that was so controversial, that could totally tank anything they try to do. It is politically convenient that maybe he might not know about this until after he asks voters to reelect him.
But I mean, if that does happen, and they don't have to come up with $500 million next year. They have to come up with a portion of it, right? Or is it the whole 550?
No, they would see their pension. They would see their pension contributions spike in the single time frame by $550 million.
The total budget is $7.3 billion. There's $61 million in new taxes in this budget, and then they'd have to come up with an additional $550 million.
This is what we've been talking about, Ken. Yeah. This is why this is a little bit of a problem. This is why everyone's so upset.
Yeah, and justifiably so. Okay, well, we got a minute left. Let's finish up on politics. I mean, is there any pressure on Toni Preckwinkle to get back in? Is that just ridiculous?
It down. I mean,
she has shot it down.
And she shot it down. Yeah. I don't think she's going to do it.
She's serious about this. I think. I don't think she wants to do it.
I don't know who steps up, and I don't know who would step up unless there's. I mean, when I talked to Don Rose and asked him any way that Emanuel would lose, and this was his opinion, he said, watch the forecast. And this is brought to you by the guy who beat Michael Bolandic with John Byrne with the snowstorm commercials in 1979. Yeah. So, I don't know, polar vortex. I don't know who could jump in. I think it's unless something big happens, as everyone I talked to told me, it seems like it's Emanuel's race to lose.
The Jane Byrne election was not because of the snow. It was because of a new series of L cars that had been delivered with motors that had slots on them that the ice got into, and it burned out all those motors. That's why the election happened, because that's what happened. The CTA broke down, and the CTA took all the L cars away from the black community and put them in the white community,
stations,
and that just set everybody off. And, anyway. Wow. So we haven't resolved really anything on your departure, I'm afraid.
No.
I thought you were going to leave us with a nice, clean...
I thought we would too, and the fact that we didn't means that I'm out of here.
Yeah, okay.
I'm done with this.
All right, well, good luck to you.
Today.
Good luck
Thank
to
you very much, as always, for having me.
It's been a real pleasure having you here, and good luck.
It's one of two things I'll miss about Chicago.
Wow. This is one of two. What's the other?
What's the other one? I can't imagine. John, thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
See you real soon. Back at the table here. You've been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV. Watch for our new edition of Vermont Newsroom coming up sometime soon. You can, of course, find us right here on cable. You can see us online at this very address. If you go here, you can watch us any old time you want. You can check us out on iTunes, too. I'm Ken Davis. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week right here on Chicago Newsroom. Bye.